Pokémon, the biggest franchise in the world. I think we all remember our first Pokémon game and how magical it felt to catch our very first Pokémon. I know I remember. Yeah, my first introduction to Pokemon was Pokemon Go. When I was a kid, I thought Pokemon looked lame. I remember how I was at a garage sale and how, lo and behold, there were Game Boy Advance games there. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 4, Spider-Man, and Pokemon Leaf Green, all for 99 cents. I grabbed Tony Hawk and Spider-Man and left behind Pokemon because it was a kid's game and I was grown up. Now that I have grown up, I've lived to regret that decision, as that story is why to this day I don't pick individual stocks. But around 2016, I played a game that forever changed my perspective. My friend talked me into downloading Pokemon Go and I was immediately hooked. I loved this game when it came out. The step mechanic that told you if you were getting closer or farther away was just perfect. Yeah, the game sometimes didn't work at launch, but with enough patience you'd be having some genuine video game fun in the great outdoors. And this was a phenomenon when it came out. I remember seeing people playing it that I never imagined would play video games, much less a Pokemon one. It really was a unique moment in time where you made friends with random people by telling them where Squirtle was. After this, I immediately knew I wanted to go back and play the original games. By this time I had realized my old Game Boy Advance could play older Game Boy games, so I looked up the price of Pokemon Blue, and I was very upset that I couldn't afford it. $20 was out of my price range at that time. I just didn't have that kind of money back then. However, I was one savvy businessman back then, and by that I mean I won the business department award at my high school that year, and with that award came fame, notoriety, and most importantly, a $25 Amazon gift card. A few clicks later, an authentic copy of Pokemon Blue in okay condition was headed straight to my house. The label was badly worn, but the battery worked, and I immediately loved what I had played. Unfortunately, it would be years later when I got into video game collecting, and by then the prices for older Pokemon games no longer felt reasonable, so I haven't played any of the ones from Game Boy Advance or DS, but most of the others I've at least tried. What really surprised me though is when I was at a retro game store and I saw a game called PokePark Pikachu's Adventure on the Wii. I thought I was familiar with all the big Nintendo games on Wii. Back then all I'd do is watch YouTube videos about Wii games, but this is one I'd never heard of, so I bought it and then I immediately forgot about it for a few years until I decided to try it out the other day. I had no idea what this game was at all. I'd never really even heard it discussed by anyone. Based on the name, I was expecting a minigame collection along the lines of Carnival games or Wii Play, and as you'll see, I was sort of right, but not really, as what this game actually is shocked me. Let's start with the story. Pikachu and his friends are just walking along until they fall into this random hole in the ground. This hole takes them to the PokePark, which is powered by these crystals which are missing because the Pokemon inside PokePark are not getting along, which may cause the sky to fall down onto the PokePark, killing everyone. In other words, the story is not the focus here. After I was already captivated by that stunning intro, I was even more intrigued when I got to actually control Pikachu. This is a 3D action-adventure game where you play as Pikachu. I was not expecting this at all. I thought at most it'd maybe have point-and-click controls with the Wii pointer where I told the Pokemon where to go, but I was not expecting full 3D movement at all. In fact, what this game reminded me of the most upon startup was The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess. You have 3D character movement in a forest tutorial area on the Wii. The similarities pretty much end there, but still, it's a way higher quality game than I expected. So you move Pikachu around in 3D space. He can jump with the 2 button and dash with the 1 button. Using the A button will do a Thunderbolt attack, and later in the game you can shake the Wii remote to do a Tail Whip attack. You'll notice I mentioned 2, 1, and A as the main buttons you'll be hitting, which means to control this game you'll be holding the Wii remote sideways, which means you'll move in a 3D space with the D-pad, and I have never played a game where that feels good. I cannot think of a single reason the nunchuck isn't used. If you're making a 3D game and make me control it with a D-pad, please consider a different career path.
Have you considered joining the unemployed industry, sir?
It doesn't ruin the game, but it does impact it very negatively. So what do you do in this game? What is the gameplay loop? The goal of this game is to make friends with all the other Pokemon by playing games with them. Different Pokemon will have you partake in different minigames. After beating a minigame, the Pokemon will become your friend and you'll be able to replay the same minigame at a higher difficulty a second time to become best friends. Befriending certain Pokemon may cause other Pokemon to appear in the park, allowing you to befriend them too. However, you'll find some Pokemon won't talk to you unless you already have a certain number of friends, just like in high school. As a result of this, you won't be able to play their minigames, possibly locking your progression until you have enough friends. As for the minigames themselves, there's hide and seek, which is self-explanatory and kind of lame. Then there's chase, which is also self-explanatory but can be made more challenging by Pokemon attacking you while you chase them. Every now and then you'll have a Pokemon who quizzes you or gives you a fetch quest, like having to pick up these random bottles littered all over the beach. This has Bidoof's name written all over it. But the best minigame is the battle. That's right, this game actually has live-action battles with other Pokemon. The system isn't extremely in-depth, but it's still pretty cool. Especially at the beginning though, you'll win all the fights with no problem, but I actually enjoyed the battles a lot during my playthrough due to a time-tested Pokemon game tradition tradition, self-imposed challenge. See, another feature of this game is that you can actually upgrade Pikachu's abilities using the berries you've earned from battling and racing other Pokemon. You can upgrade your HP, dash speed, lightning attack, and tail attack. If you're a bit more of a seasoned gamer and decide to revisit this game, I suggest you do what I did for my playthrough. I only upgraded my dash speed. By underleveling Pikachu, some of the fights were genuinely challenging, which made things fun. I strongly suggest playing this way, otherwise things are going to get boring fast. Now, I had the most fun with the battle system, but the main attractions here are supposed to be the attractions. These park zones are filled with a handful of these attractions that go with the zone aesthetic. There's the meadow area, beach area, ice area, cave area, fire area, scary area, granite area, and sky area. Each area has about 2 attractions to choose from, and what these games are basically just Mario Party minigames. Now you'll remember I expected this game to be a minigame collection, but these minigames feel more like they were a tacked on afterthought rather than what the game was built around. I mean, some of them are as simple as shake the Wii remote as fast as you can. Very groundbreaking game design here. Despite that, I'd say at the very worst they're harmless, as you can beat most of them in 20 seconds, but there's a few that I found to be good fun. One cool idea with these minigames is that you can play as some of the Pokemon you've befriended in the park, and each Pokemon has slightly different stats for the minigame, which is a cool concept, but again, they're basically at the level of Mario Party minigames, so this is a neat idea that feels a bit wasted in this title. I had no problems with the attractions until it came to the post-game. The post-game encourages you to beat every single minigame with every single Pokemon that can play the game. Usually there's around 10 to 15 Pokemon that can play each attraction, and after you've cleared the attraction with each Pokemon, you can become friends with a legendary or mythical Pokemon. It's a cool idea on paper, but again, because these minigames are so basic, you'll never find yourself wanting to complete them 20 times in a row for a checklist, so I didn't bother doing this after I beat the campaign. It just takes way too long. Some other things to note is that there's a photo mode, nice. The game has a fast travel system that works well, and also the music is pretty average if a bit too simple and repetitive at times. One thing I did like though was some of the writing. There's some funny moments in the game, like Caterpie playing chase and going extremely slow because, well, he's a caterpillar. The game is full of moments like this, which to me shows the developers actually cared when they were making it. The writing shows some heart, which I found to be severely lacking in some of the newer games. Don't get me wrong, there's some classic Pokemon jank in here, like these fire pillars. Like, come on guys, he could totally fit through here. This is about as good as just having an invisible wall. However, as I said before, I feel like this game had some love put in it. The writing, the mechanics, and just the overall scale and scope of this game is admirable, especially because it seems to target an even younger audience than the mainline Pokemon games. This makes me think that this wasn't just a quick cash grab. It wasn't Wii Play with the Pokemon skin like I was expecting. This is an interesting experience that Pokemon has never done before, since if you ignore this game's sequel that I'll maybe look at some point. All the zones feel lovingly crafted, and all the Pokemon in those zones feel like they fit. It also helps for me personally that this game came out during the Gen 4 era, so I still know the names of most of these Pokemon. But now we have to decide, is this a hidden gem? Well, I'm gonna say it depends on who's playing this game. If you're an experienced gamer, you're not likely to get much out of it. For you, I'd say it's mostly just interesting for its historic novelty as a very unique Pokemon spin-off. But if you get this game for your son or daughter or younger sibling, someone between the ages of 7 to 10 who is really into Pokemon, I think you definitely would be giving them a hidden gem. This game is made for a younger, more inexperienced demographic, and I think that's just great. It's important for games like this to exist. I really don't like how sometimes these types of games are dismissed by professional reviewers. For example, a few years ago I saw the SpongeBob Battle for Bikini Bottom remake get absolutely crushed by some. Now I didn't like that remake for my own reasons, mainly the physics felt worse than the original, but this is besides the point. I saw some older people online who didn't grow up with the game saying it's nothing special, but I wholeheartedly disagree. That game was incredibly special because I can ask anyone into SpongeBob who was my age at the time, which was everyone who was my age at the time, and they all loved that game. For many of us, that was one of the games that got us into gaming. I've seen so many people online cite that game specifically as being the intro for them. Maybe it wasn't groundbreaking when comparing it to every game ever made as a whole, but when you compare it to kids' games available at the time, it definitely is special, and I'm willing to bet that PokePark is someone's SpongeBob Battle for Bikini Bottom. Kids' games are usually bad. For me, the PS2 had so many cheap licensed games that Battle really stood out. For Wii kids, they were absolutely bombarded with horrible shovelware that their parents probably bought for them because they thought, oh, my kid loves Mr. Potato Head. So for there to be a really well-made Pokemon kids game that has heart and soul put into it, I think that's a really great thing. And if you still have a Wii and know anyone who fits into that demographic that I mentioned, I absolutely recommend getting this game for them. I think they'll have a great time with it. And at that, I want to thank you for watching Hydrated Gaming. Make sure to drink lots of water and stay hydrated. Have a nice day.